one of the most wonderful times of my life.
Wow. Okay. So shamanic initiation.
Yeah.
So this is funny. So it's very blurry, right? Because
Hmm.
people taking mushrooms in a ritual setting and shamanic initiation, like those kind of blend, right?
Hmm.
Meditation and these owls and death, people
Hmm.
seeing owls around the time. And the stories I'm collecting, there's a lot of lore, there's a lot of folklore of owls, like the hooting of an owl, someone sees an owl and then like a loved one dies. That's
Yeah.
all over mythology. That's right in Shakespeare. It happens more than once in Shakespeare plays. Someone will hear an owl and then a character in the play will die.
Mhm.
Now, that's the lore. I get some of those stories, but very few. What I'm getting are what is much more common, and I have it in my own direct experience, where a, it's usually um, a loved one, most often a parent will die. And the child, I mean, obviously the child can be an adult, but the if a father or mother passes, shortly after they pass, an owl will show up and they will talk to the owl as if it is their parent. It's universal. I'm convinced that if when we lived in the caves, if someone's parent died, they would step out of the cave. There would be an owl, and that what we would call primitive person would talk to the owl as if it was their parent. I have so many stories of that happening right now, modern times, from what I can only say are the most respectable of people. Now,
Mhm.
so these five things, right? So owls and UFOs, right? So when people go on a UFO, when people tell stories about UFOs, it sounds like a near-death experience.
Yeah.
Time is distorted. They know everything in the universe. There's all these issues. People go on flying saucers. The guy gets taken out of his bed. He gets taken out of a flying saucer. He forgets his glasses. His glasses are sitting on the bedside. He can see everything perfectly. It's
Right.
it's something else is going on than it being on a metal spaceship. And you were making reference to the fairies. Like there's a total overlap. The fairy and UFO thing they're just the same story with a different outfit, right? The so let me UFOs, meditation, shamanic initiation, psychedelics, death. All
Yeah.
of those are transformational events. So it's not that the owl is connected to the UFO. The owl is connected to the highly charged transformational events of which those five things represent. You know what I have very few owls connected to is the near death experience. Like you would think people who have come back from an NDE would have a powerful owl experiences. You were right. You're right there, but you're also tipping into these other things where you're talking about seeing UFO sightings and stuff like that. And here's another thing that I can say with absolute 100% certainty: people who have had an owl experience, a near-death experience,
Mhm.
and a UFO contact experience. Wow, those people are off the charts psychic. From my research, there might be some exceptions out there. I haven't found them, but that pattern
Yeah.
is cemented in my mind. Um, now, okay, you asked a question about my own experience of.
Well, if I may, I have a few things to add before I
Oh,
forget. Is that
please, please.
okay? So I have other owl experience, as I said, and this may not be necessarily death related, but I did have one experience. Maybe at some point privately, I can tell you more details, but just in general, there was a person who came to me cloaked as an owl, a very, very large owl, like had to have been at least 4 feet tall, 3.5, 4 feet tall, and asked me if I really wanted to be here.
Mm.
And that if I wanted out before before I was too grounded here, you know what I mean? That they would be happy to take me somewhere that's more harmonious for me. So that was another one.
And that wow, this is so that's the
Yeah.
message of the velvet bubble too.
It was that I don't have to be here. So it's very fascinating though. Owls have been with me every single step of the way in every single one of these experiences, every single one. And that's why when I found your work a few years ago, I do tend to be busy, and again, recovering, I don't always listen to things all the way through, but you
Hmm.
and your work fascinated me enough that I've been following you for a while, you and a few other people actually. So it's quite the honor to get to talk to you and get to lend to your research, maybe from a perspective that's not quite there yet in some of the research. So
Oh, it's in my. Oh, there's no. Everything you're saying is like right down the center lane for my stuff.
that's
It's like
that's
I people. So what happens to me all the time is some people are you're self-aware of your own abilities and stuff. Oftentimes people contact me with very similar stories to what they're telling, and but they're like, what does it mean? Like, am I going crazy? What is this like? Like I can't tell anyone,
yeah,
and I'm like,
yeah,
this is normal, right? Obviously, it's not every person every day doesn't have these experiences, but these experiences are normal. It is the
yeah,
source of our owl mythology
yeah.
that
I
these accounts all throughout human history. Yeah.
For sure. And I've counseled a few people in the past who have had strong owl connections and gone through that rough awakening when I was a paranormal counselor. And so I would help them by offering essentially existential therapy. Like, okay, this is what's going on. Life maybe is pretty absurd. How can we move forward in a happy and healthy way for you now? Just accepting whatever is. And that seemed to soothe the spirit a lot for those people. But what I had wanted to say also is that there are lots and lots of fairy tales as well as UFO lore that say that the dead human people are often amongst the fairies and the UFOs and whatnot. And so this is why I believe that fairies, humans, aliens, and shadow people and everything else, I think we're all just one big happy family, quote unquote.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that human beings, because human beings are very, very physical, the brain filter shuts down most of what else is there. And I find that really interesting and unique because human people live one type of ego and one type of story in life, in a lifetime. And I think that some of the people, at least this is my experience, who pose as owls or who are represented by owls, I think that they have a kaleidoscope type of psychology and ego development, which is why we see so many different facets of this type of phenomenon, but why the symbol, the mask, stays the same
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
representation. So that's kind of my theory, but I think that death and enchanted owl encounters and the ayahuasca and the near-death experiences and the experiences with non-human people, I think all of that changes the trajectory of a person's incarnate life in ways that we probably can't understand until we get back home. You know what I mean? But I think that owls play such an integral part in all of this that it can't be discounted because it is present in classic fairy
Mm-hmm.
encounters. It's present sometimes in shadow people encounters, as well as UFOs. And then there's the mythology and all of that. So I think that owls might be a whole lot more and a whole lot less than most people think. I hope that makes sense. I just
Oh yeah,
realized
yeah, 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 yeah.
how nuts that sounds.
No, 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 no. But
Oh,
so we're like there's pragmatic researchers that like want to be very scientific. This is like I don't know if I can get those oftentimes those are men, right?
mhm.
Like I'm going to be very, those men want to be there's like the engineering school has a lot of men in the engineering
Yeah,
school and the art department has a lot of women in it. So
yeah,
like so there's like the artist and then there's the engineer or the scientist.
yeah.
And so you look at this subject through the eyes of an artist, through the eyes
Mhm,
of a shaman, through
mhm.
the eyes of a creative type, through the eyes of a poet, you're gonna through the eyes of an intuitive. So you're gonna the engineer scientific type is gonna just say that is invalid. That's not. I'm gonna dismiss that outright. I'm not gonna pay attention to it.
Yeah,
But you get two people together. This is something that any two thoughtful people sitting together talking about UFOs should very quickly go right to, what does it all mean? Why are we here? What is reality? Is there a God?
Mm-hmm.
Those scientific folks, they might get there, but it's a so. When I was doing the research, I have an iPad, right? So I'm looking stuff up in books, and someone says, "Oh, you should get this book." And I was living at the time in Idaho, right? There's the nearest bookstore is like freaking where it's a long ways away. But it's a modern age. I could just order the book on Kindle, and that
Yeah.
would be there within 5 seconds for $9, right? It cost me more than $9 in gas to go get something, you know. And then I would look up the word I want to look up was owl. Right? You get an esoteric book, a book about UFO contact. I want to find out if there's owls in the book. So I type the word owl into the search engine. It brings up other words. It brings up the word knowledge. It brings up other words, bowl and stuff like that too, but slowly shows up. But knowledge has OWL right in the word.
Yeah. Yep.
And I look at my iPad and I'm like, no, I'm not interested in knowledge. I am not interested in knowledge. I am seeking the owl. I am not interested in knowledge. I am seeking the owl. It was so clear to me. I was caught myself doing it. I was like, this is a metaphor for what this research is. I have to turn my back on knowledge, and I have to walk towards the mythopoetic symbolism of the owl, and I have to trust my intuition. I have to trust my heart, because if I trusted my intellect, I would say that stuff that happened to me when I was 12 years old could not happen. It's impossible. 5 aliens in the backyard, can't be real. I have to, that was not serving me. That sort of scientific, pragmatic, knowledge-based. I had to go fully intuitive, fully trust my heart, fully listen to people's stories. And what it did is, I don't have an answer. I can say that owls, UFOs, synchronicities, these things are all somehow, they're part of the same tapestry. This tapestry is woven really tight, where these are all part of the same tapestry, and you pull on one thread and it's going to tug on the other thread. You pull on the owl, it's going to pull on the UFO. And that has been so helpful for me in my own research, in my own sense of peace with this, because for a long time I was not at peace with this at all. I'm a much calmer person. This research has been a form of therapy for me.
What had upset you so much about it? I don't quite understand.
Oh, after the events with, I when I was 30 years old, I had a severe bout of clinical depression, like dangerous, like near suicide. And then I was struggling with that for 20 years. So between 30 to 50, roughly, I was on saw all kinds of therapists. I took all kinds of pharmaceuticals, some of which helped. I think I made a ton of progress. But also, in starting with the owls in the mountains with Kristen, in the aftermath of that, what was happening leading up to the event, you know how like if you got boiling water in a pot on the stove and the lid's on it, like right before it boils, there's this tension, this inherent tension, and the pot's just going to go tick 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 tick.
I remember.
Yeah. So that tension, that's what my life felt like. It felt just before the water was about to boil. And it was like, I was reading UFO books at the time. I was saying, no way. And at the same time, I was like, there's going to be a day when I'm going to have to look into this.
Yep.
I saw the owls with Kristen. No UFOs in the story except for the voice in my head. And I started looking in the aftermath of that, I started looking into my own UFO experiences by contacting UFO researchers. A fellow named Leo Sprinkle. He has since passed on, a glorious, big-hearted guy. But he would say, Mike, here, like, that's an interesting story. Call this person. And it would be a person who had experience. I would call that person.
Yeah.
And I would ask everyone, have you had any owl experiences? And they'd say, yeah. And I'd contact another one. So I very quickly had this network. I started the blog. I very quickly had a network of people. In those years, I was hit with so many synchronicities that defy all logic, synchronicities that any logical, the scientific, pragmatic scientist would say, no way, impossible, can't happen. But from my own direct experience, it happened. It was happening.
Yeah.
And they all had to do with either owls or UFOs. So I was, from that point on, I was, and I'm very open about this. It's right in my book. I say it from the stage. I say between 2006 and 2013, I spent 95% of my waking hours wondering if I had gone insane.
I think that's really common.
Yep,
Like,
and I know it is too. And
crazy.
I remember asking someone at a UFO conference, like, when is this going to end? And he goes, how long have you been? 3 years. It was more like 6 years, but that was it was a good thing. He said, what's, he said, give it 3 years. I'm like, that's 3 years, a long time if you're struggling. And then I had an event in 2013, which was sort of what I called my confirmation event, where it was like, no way was this random. Like, this happened. And here's what happened. So I can tell you about the event, but I'll just tell you the outcome of the event. It felt like I had like a tape loop in my head, right? This is a decade ago. Tape loop in my head that had been running since 2006 that said, this can't be happening. This can't be real. This can't be happening to you or me. It's my own voice saying it. This can't be happening to me. Can't be real. It's not happening. It's impossible. Can't be happening to me. And that just went on and on and on and on and on and on. I had what I call my confirmation event. I was like, oh crap. Oh, this is real. My old life ended. My new life began. Like, this is real. This is real. And the tape loop just that got pulled out of my head and tossed in the trash. It's gone. Hasn't been back. My life was still complicated. I still had stuff to deal with. I still had challenges, but I didn't have that voice that said, this can't be happening. And wow, did that make my life easier.
I had something similar of an experience in here this last year. I met Tim Swartz in March, and by June, I believe it was, he had invited me to write with Zontar Press. And then he worked with me on quietly behind the scenes on that. And then end of October going into November, he had encouraged me to make this channel and to start, being a lot more public and whatnot. And he was helping me with all of those related things. And ever since then, my life moved so very quickly since March. I feel like March really kind of was the turning point for me.
Do you have a date? Do you know the date in March?
Ooh.
You don't worry. My confirmation event, which was March 10th,
I believe,
2013.
if I'm remembering properly, mine was March 20th.
Okay.
If I remember properly. He did a show on Coast to Coach. I didn't have my latte today. Can you tell?
Oh, I've been drinking coffee here, so I know just what you meant. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh man, Coast to Coast. I think it was March 18th. He did a show about the last book that he and my co-authors put out. This is, before I got on the team. And I heard the show that he did, and I was just so very impressed with how objectively open-minded, in my opinion, that he was. And I was like, I have to get a hold of him and at least offer my services and my care and my encouragement and whatnot, and maybe we could strike a deal. Wouldn't you know it, he wrote me back, I think like a day or two later. And that was kind of the turning point there. And then the next one was April. Again, my near-death experience. Do you really want to do this? And if so, here's how it's going to go. But since then, it's really, everything has just fallen into place. Everything's been smooth as butter as far as it can be, you know, with getting all of this up. And then for a while, the UFO experiences were picking up for my husband and I. And now finally they've calmed down, and I am in the absolute thick of this YouTube channel and speaking engagements and writing and all of that. So it seems like maybe that's the push that all of this was going towards, was getting me to this point, if
Mm-hmm.
that makes sense.
Sure.
So
Oh yeah. 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 Absolutely. What
fine.
was going on in your life leading up to the event? What changed after? Yeah. So,
Yeah. Yep.
so I can tell you that story.
Mhm. I would
So,
love.
so March 10th, 2013, which is
Yes.
a little over 10 years ago, um, I so like the event of March 10th, 2013 is a little complicated to tell because it's connected to so many other things. So I
Okay.
was I was coming home from a UFO conference, and the UFO conference was in Arizona and I lived in Idaho. You got to go through Utah, right? So I
Okay.
was in southern Utah. This is like the magical land of this, like where they filmed the Roadrunner cartoons. It's like that terrain. I was in that terrain, and I love that terrain. I love that landscape. So there was a point when I was like, I'm gonna sleep on the side of the road. And I had been over this one pass years ago, and I was like, I bet you I'm gonna find a good spot there. I just had this visual of where I was gonna sleep, and I go over this pass, and it's right there, and I make a turn. And so, like, I was doing a lot of camping at the time, and living out west, it's very normal to be able to just camp on the side of the road. It's not so, it's different in the east. You can't really pull that off, but out west, it's well understood. You just pull off on the side of the road. And so there was a little pull off, and there was some old fire rings and stuff like that. Oh, to tell the story properly, it could just goes on and on and on and on. So I I pull off on the side of the road. It's March. It's cold. It's technically winter. I did all kinds of outdoor work. I got a big thick sleeping bag. I got a big thick pad. I got a pillow. I just pull it out of the back of my Subaru. I lay it on the ground, and I go to sleep. And it's a beautiful night, cold, clear, trillions of stars. It was a new moon, so there was no moon out. Magnificent. There was another car in this little turnout. And it's so funny. This is like the way the license plates are in Wyoming. Each county has a license, has a number on it. This was from Fremont County, and I was like, the Fremont County is a really, there's like hardly any. There's a couple towns in there, and anyone driving around that part of Utah in a Jeep, and that I'm convinced I know the people in that car. I've been searching, but I worked for the school, which was located in Fremont County. I'm like, that's someone I know. That's someone I know in that car. I just felt it, and I'm certain. So I'm at anyway, this 10 years ago. So I'm just saying that there's like so much to the story that overlaps. And now I wake up, there's a big round thing on the top of a hill near me. This is the desert, open terrain, some bushes around, but it's essentially open. And there's a big hill, and there's a thing sitting on top of this hill. I didn't notice it when I went to sleep, and I look up there and I said, that looks just like a landed flying saucer. And I had been doing all the research. I was already known as the owl guy. I already had a podcast. I already had the blog. I'd already collecting owl stories. And I was just like, hey man, like I got like I have psychic flashes now and again, and I got pretty good intuition on some things. So I was like, if this was a UFO, I would know it. Deep down, I would know it. I would feel it. So I looked at this big round thing in the hill. I felt nothing at all. Nothing. So I rolled over and went to sleep. I woke up again, and there was a coyote near my head. It's hard to say near my head. I didn't see a coyote, but it was a coyote so loud that it was so close. I do not understand why I couldn't see it. I sat up, I looked around. I slept outside thousands of nights. I've heard a lot of coyotes. I've never heard one that close.
Mhm.
So, excuse me. So I roll over in the big round structures up on the hill there. I roll over and go to sleep. I woke up a third time, and there's a bush, a juniper bush right near my feet. And there's a glow on the other side of the bush. And I did the thing where I sat up, and I kind of like did the thing where I was like, is there something behind that bush, and maybe someone just pulled in. There's cars. There was another 2 cars in this spot. Maybe someone else just pulled in. They're doing exactly what I did. But it didn't look like headlights, didn't look like a flashlight, didn't look like the little dome light inside a car. It was a different, weird, different light. So I just rolled over and went to sleep. The next morning I got up, it's interesting. I got up before the sun came up. That was the weekend the time changed. So my flip phone at the time didn't match the thing in the car. I was like, what is going on? Time was all messed up. But then I realized so I was already in a weird headspace. Like something happened this night.
Mm-hmm.
So I get home. The first thing I did so it's a 10-hour drive from that spot to my house. So I get home. I look on Google Maps. And I'm very skilled with maps, all the outdoor work I did.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And I look up that site, and there's no big building on a hill. I mean, if there was a building up there, there'd have to be a road up there, and so since then I've been back to that spot many times. There's nothing on that hill. And so now what happened after that, this is where I can't really tell the whole thing without eating up another hour. I did an illustration of the thing. I wrote a blog post. I got the GPS coordinates to the millimeter to where I was sleeping, to where the thing on the hill must have been, because it was in a what's called a saddle on a hill. So that's very easy to pick out on a map, a topographical map. So I know exactly where this thing was. I know exactly where I was sleeping, and then I was standing by my desk, and I had this like vision, like this 1 second flash in my mind, and I saw, and I have it in my notes here. I can just do it real quick for you here. I'll do it real quick for you. I had, where's I got a pen? So we got visuals. I'm an illustrator, so it was and this would have been, so there was a map. It's not that exciting of an image. So there was a map with 3 dots on a line. And the line was yellow, and the 3 little push pins kind of things. But I saw it on a map of southern Utah. And I was like, well, the westernmost spot, I know right where that was. That was where I was last night. Mm-hmm. And the easternmost spot, that was an event that happened in 2010. And I had to figure out the middle spot. So I figured out the middle spot and the eastern spot. And let me tell you, those 2 events play out like UFO contact. They sound just like every UFO abduction story you hear. And I was like, no way, not going there. Couldn't have happened. Not thinking about it. So these 3 things, and I could zoom in on the map and line them up in a perfectly straight line, right? So you turn the clock back a few dozen years. In the olden days, if I wanted to do this, I would have to get a great big map of Utah, and I would have to get a really long ruler and a really sharp pencil, and I would have to connect these things on a map like that. I could zoom in, I could get that little yellow line 1 pixel thick, and it was lined up exactly where I was sleeping in the sand in Boulder, Utah. And so these 3 things lined up, and that's when I said, like, oh, my old life ended, my new life began, the tape loop of doubt, I could throw it out. My life changed. That was my confirmation event. From that point on, my life got easier. Well, not so much easier. Things were easier simply because I didn't have that voice in my head. Now,
yeah,
no fear associated with that date in March 10th, 2013.
Wow.
And so I eventually did a hypnosis session.
Mm-hmm.
And I did. Do you know who Yvonne Smith is? She's a hypnotherapist, does work with experiencers. She's based out of California. So I was going to be in California. I was going to actually be doing a talk on I was asked to go to a school and do a talk on camping, the type of camping I do. So, and so I was going to be near LA. So I called up Yvonne, who I'd met at conferences, and I hadn't seen her for a few years. And the book had already been out. The first book, the Blue Book, came out in 2015. The event, the hypnosis session, took place in 2018, so 3 years later. And I call her up, and she answers the phone, and she says, "Mike, what a nice surprise. I started your book this morning."
Oh, wow.
So that's like, okay, like the stories are just like, the synchronicities are just like stacked up so tight that I can't I can't. The tapestry is woven so tight. You pull on one synchronicity, it tugs on five more.
That's what I was about to say too. And so your story is interesting to me because it has synchronicities, it has UFOs, and then it also has hills slash mounds that comes into play a lot in these intriguing encounters. And then there's owls, the overarching owl phenomena that you have going on. What
Well,
an
I'll also add that
yeah,
it had a coyote, which I
that's
think is
right. That's right.
a powerful totem animal.
Yes.
So the middle point on the map
Yeah.
here took place in 2011. I was
Uh-huh.
camping with Natasha. I don't know which is right or left here, but then another one over here, which was also took place with a friend of mine, Natasha. We were dating at the time, and she's had UFO contact experiences and owl experiences. And so when we were camped in the middle, I was sleeping on the ground. She's from Germany. We had been to a UFO conference together. She was totally jet lagged, so she couldn't sleep. And I'd been driving all day, so we were coming home from a UFO conference, and I was tired. We were in this lovely, perfect, safe spot in a beautiful starry night, and Natasha said, "Mike, I can't sleep." And I said, "Go for a walk." She said, "Really?" I said, "Sure, it's safe here. Don't worry about it. It's safe." And she walked away from our little where the car was parked, and we have it on the map. And her and I have sat with the map, and I'm like very analytical. I make fun of the scientific guy, but I'm pretty analytical when it comes down to this stuff. Like I want to understand.
I
So
think you're a scientific folklorist, my friend. That's what I'm
okay,
going to call you.
great. So you can put scientific in small letters and folklorist
Yes,
in all
yes.
capital letters and underline folklorist. Yeah. So
Yep.
um and then so I so I'm lying there.
Mhm.
Natasha walks off. Near my head in the bush, a juniper bush near my head, is a great horned owl hooting as loud as I've ever heard an owl. I sat up, I looked at this bush. I couldn't understand why I couldn't see it. It is so similar to the coyote from 2013, the event from 2011 has the same thing. An owl was so close and so loud. I don't understand why I didn't see it. The coyote was so close and so loud. I don't understand why I didn't see it. Was this like a screen memory or like an audio screen memory? I could make that argument. There's no way I can prove or disprove that, but I don't know what to think. What I can say is both are powerful archetypal totem animals with
Yes.
lots and lots and lots of mystique and folklore and mythology surrounding their presence. Now, so Natasha walks off. She says it was such a beautiful night. The stars lit up everything. There was no moon. The stars lit up everything. It felt like I was sparkling. She said it was so
Ooh.
beautiful. It felt like I was sparkling. And she looks off, and in the bushes and sagebrush off to the side of the road, this is an asphalt road. It's called the Burr Trail Road. It's right on the map.
Okay.
She's walking along, and she sees a dot of light, and she says, "Someone's got a flashlight. Someone's out there in the with a flashlight." But then the light sort of floats towards her, and this light floats towards her. It's a floating orb of white light, blue white light, floating orb of blue white light floats towards her, gets really big, and goes, poof, kind of explodes and disappears. Then she's scared, so she comes back to me and says, "Mike, we got to leave." And she's scared, and then I'm scared, and we get in the car, we drive off. We've since sat down with the map, and I'm like, "Did you hear the owl?" She's like, "No." She's like a football field away. It's not that far. And that was on a cold, clear, calm desert night. Sound carries for miles. She should have been able to hear that owl 3 miles away. She never
Mhm.
heard it. Maybe not 3 miles, but a mile away, she should have been able to hear that owl.
Oh,
Now,
wow.
the other event.
If I may,
Oh, sure.
I have something you may like to hear about too. I'm
Oh,
noticing
please,
another
please,
pattern.
please.
Yeah, with the pattern I'm seeing right now, you had that owl experience right there, and then your friend had the experience with the light. Light experiences are extremely common with UFOs and then also with the old fairy
Hmm.
accounts
Oh,
too.
yeah. Will o' the
But
Wisp.
then, yes. Precisely. And something too that I find intriguing you brought up is the juniper bush. So juniper, with its berries are often associated with the Fae and missing 411. Are you familiar?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And it's really interesting to me that the owl was hooting to you from a berry bush. I
Mm-hmm.
find that absolutely a fascinating connection. So again, it's just again humans and fairies and the UFOs and the so-called aliens. There are so many connections there, and it's interesting that your stories reflect all of that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it was mostly about the juniper bush though that I wanted to say.
Well, there's two juniper bush at my feet with a bright light behind it too. So,
Yeah, that as
yeah.
well. But please do continue.
So the event on the easternmost spot
Mhm.
was right near Dolores, Colorado. So it was technically outside the boundary of Utah, but if you look at Dolores, Colorado, it's right on the border. Now, Natasha and I were sleeping in a tent that night. And this story, to tell this story properly, takes a long time, but basically, we both woke up screaming in terror.
Oh.
Out of a sound sleep, we both woke up screaming in terror, like freaked out. Like I've worked in the outdoors. I worked in grizzly country. I've I'm pretty darn content sleeping in a tent. This isn't a
Yeah.
campground. This is not, well, it's not really a campground. It's just on the side of the road and right outside of Dolores, Colorado. And I'm basically panicking. Both of us are panicking. Like there's no reason we should be that. There's no noise. There was nothing there. There was no reason. There was nothing. It wasn't like there was like a, like a bear like sniffing around the tent. There was nothing.
Hmm.
And we went from total terror to asleep. And then I felt like I was floating out of the tent. And this just goes on and on. There was in the tent as I was floating up, there was a floating mandala, right?
Hmm.
I call it a floating pizza pan with a single dot in the middle. I called it a mandala. Right? I made notes that morning and I called it a mandala. So it felt like I floated up. I went right through the top of the tent. I was in a white realm, a white realm. That's all I can say. And I was saying, I have to remember this. I have to remember this. I have to remember this. Then I said, am I on a table? Am I on a table? Am I on a table? And then I heard, now Natasha's from Germany and she's got an accent, and Natasha in her very soft voice said, Mike, you're floating. And then whoosh, I was back in the tent. I don't think that happened, but that's my memory. I really don't think that's happened, but that's my memory.
Okay.
And the next morning, oh my God, I had this weird scratch on my body, and she saw like the mandala in a different way that I saw it, but it's just like layer upon layer upon layer. And so that afternoon we went to, oh, this story just is so complex. That afternoon we went to a shamanic ritual. Well, let's say a traditional ritual run by a Navajo elder, a sweat lodge ceremony.
Mm-hmm.
And the theme was surrender. And it was like this metaphoric death and rebirth where you go in the sweat lodge and you come out reborn. That's the metaphor for the ritual. So it just all these threads, every thread is so highly charged with these events. Now, when I went to talk with, oh, here, let me add one more thing. This is so funny. So the 3 lines in the map, one of them is Dolores, Colorado. One of them is the Burr Trail Road. These were both with Natasha.
Mm-hmm.
The westernmost one was March 10th. March 10th is Natasha's birthday.
Oh.
Like how much more, how could they were laying it on thick. Everything was connected. So
For sure.
so I do a hypnosis session with Yvonne Smith. And I say in the beginning of the session, and I said, we're going to explore she asked, what do you want to explore? I said, I want to explore the night of March 10th, 2013. And I told her the story I just told you with the coyote and the hill and the bush and the glowing light and and I said, hey, while I'm under, ask me about the owls. What's up with the owls?
Yeah.
And she goes, of course. So she takes me to the site. And have you ever been through hypnosis?
No, I don't like I don't trust anyone that much.
Okay, and I trust Yvonne entirely. And I'm also very skeptical of hypnosis. But at the same time, I was like, I'm like, I gotta do like I'm like was seeking answers. And I'll tell you the story that emerged, I don't trust. It's a great story, but I don't trust it. Like, so a good story, right? A fairy
Yeah,
tale can have a lesson.
yeah.
Doesn't mean you have to treat the fairy tale as true. So I I'm lying there. Yvonne asks, like, and Mike, what's happening now? And I go, I'm lying here. It's pretty night. I'm under the stars. And like, what happens next? And I mumble a little bit of where I'm sleeping in the car, where the car's parked. This pretty stars. It's cold. My head's on the pillow. And then I say, it's them. It's them. I know it's them. It's them. And I was describing the bright light behind the bush.
Mm.
And the next thing I know, I'm like floating. I'm looking down and I'm floating. I'm looking down and I'm looking down at this big round structure with a ring of lights around it. And it's on top of this hill. And I think I'm floating above this thing. I'm looking down and up in the air and I'm looking down at this thing. And she goes, and then I say, but I think I'm still in the sleeping bag.
Mhm.
And she goes, Mike, are you out of body? And I go, I don't know, I might be, but I'm looking down at this thing, but I think I'm still in the sleeping bag. And then the next thing is like, whoosh, I'm walking in this hallway.
Yeah.
And the hallway is kind of curved, right? So it's honestly, if like there was a round flying saucer, that's the hallway that would go around the whole interior. That's what it felt like.
Okay.
And right away, I'm 6 foot tall. So right away, I'm like, I'm not tall. I just felt it immediately. I'm not tall. This does not feel like me. I am not tall. And she goes, look around. And I look to my right, and there's a gray being with big black eyes and a bald head. And I look to the left, and there's a gray being with big black eyes and a bald head. And I'm like, and they're the same height as me. Yvonne says, look down. Look down, describe what are you wearing? And I look down at my body, and I've got these long, skinny fingers, and I've got this skinny body, and I'm wearing this tight, shiny spacesuit. And I tell Yvonne,
Huh.
I think I'm a gray alien. Now, and afterwards we talked about it, and this is very common. I said, does that happen a lot? And she goes, oh, all the time. Like, okay, because I'm a gray alien. And it felt totally normal. And she goes, what happens next? And then I'm in a conference room. And I'm in this conference room, and I'm like standing facing this table. And
Mhm.
this conference room is ugly, right? It's got ugly beige carpeting. It's got ugly wallpaper. It's got harsh fluorescent light. And I'm standing there and I'm facing this table. And at the table are like 8 or 12, probably more like 8 beings, but their faces are sort of grayed out. They're sort of fuzzed out. But I'll tell you, they sure had the feeling of like 8 gray aliens. And she says, and I'm like, why am I here? Oh, let me add one more thing. Do you know how? So it was like the conference room had a back wall, and then 2 side walls, but the front was open, right? So it felt like, when like a stage set, like you like on Saturday Night Live, the sets are really simple. They're like really cheap. This was like a totally cheap set, like in a high school play. So it was
Okay.
theatrical. Like I cannot, like there's no fourth wall. So it felt like a play. It felt like a play on a stage.
Mhm.
And I cannot separate that because I tell you right now, there's no conference room with ugly beige carpeting on a flying saucer, right? So something else happened. So the beings say, I look at these beings and I go like, why am I here?
Mhm.
And they go, you volunteered for this. You chose this. I'm like, what does that mean? I chose this. Why am I here? And they go, now is the time. Like, now is the time. What does that mean? Like, you chose this. And I was getting kind of aggravated. Like, now it's time. And then there came a point when I was like this, kind of like this, like the rubber band snapped. And I was so emotional. I was freaking out and I was crying and screaming. And this is unbearable to listen to. I had to put the headset on and I had to transcribe what I was saying. And it was like, whoa, it was rough listening to me
Yeah.
cry and everything.
Oh,
This is some years ago now. I can be a little distance from it, but wow, it was rough. So I'm like screaming at these things. Can I swear on the show? I can't. Okay. So I so there would have been some bad. So I said, this is so messed up. But that's not what I said. And I'm
Right,
like
you're fine.
screaming and I'm like, okay, this is so messed up. Like these beings, they don't understand sadness. They don't understand what it means to be here. They don't understand loneliness. They don't understand depression. They don't understand pain. They don't understand the weight of what it means to be here. They never told me it would be this hard being here. They never told me it would be this difficult being here. And the implication was that I was like, I had lived where they are. I had been one of them. I was now here where I am. I'm me. I look like my parents, right? I'm me. I'm, but the implication is that I chose to be here, incarnate as this person. And then Yvonne is like, and why, Mike, why are you so emotional? And I'm like, they don't understand. And they're like, what do they want? And I scream, they want me to play some role.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then I went from as tense and as emotional, like just veins bulging on my forehead, just to click instantly. I was as calm as I've ever been. It felt like my heart stopped. It felt like I was a yogi who had been practicing meditation for a full lifetime, and I had achieved this level of calm. And it was just from total freak out to absolute Zen calm, where it felt like my heart stopped and my breathing stopped. And the audio, when that point happens in the audio, you can hear me go, and it just felt like I just deflated, just melted. And it's silent for about 45 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
And Yvonne says, what happens next? And I go, I think I'm back in the sleeping bag. And she asks me some questions like, what did they want? I'm like, I don't know. And then she says, and Mike, what is your connection to owls? And without skipping a beat, I say, the owls aren't important. Right? This is like, I'm the owl guy. I had spent close to a decade every day answering emails, talking to people on the phone, owls. I'd written books on owls. I'd written 2 books on owls at that point. And it was just like, owls were the most important thing. I never would have said that. So I said, the owls aren't important. And now this part I remember, this is like seared into my mind. And I did not sound, when you're under hypnosis, you kind of talk in these slow, halting sentences. But I was speaking very clearly, very forthrightly. I said, the owls aren't important. I am an artist, and I understand the need for a symbol and why we need symbols. The owl is a sign on a door. The owl is the correct symbol for the door, but the owl is not important. The door is important. We are in this tight, claustrophobic little hallway, and on the other side of the door is an infinite vastness. And then it ended, and I came out, and I said, "Was I channeling?" And she had a good answer. She said, "How would I know?" So, but it felt like that voice came from somewhere beyond me. And now let me just add, so that we were exploring the night of March 10th, 2013, the calendar day of March 10th, 2013. That would have been the night I slept on the side of the road, the big round structure, the coyote, the light behind the bush. March 11th, I came home. I looked up Google Maps. There was no thing. I made the map. I made the blog post. I did an illustration. I had the psychic flash.
Yeah.
I had the confirmation event. That was March 11th. March 12th, 2 days, 48 hours later, I started writing the book, The Messengers, the book that would define my life. So that night, if this is all to be taken as literal, which I don't take it literally, I take it metaphorically, it's easier for me. It might be 100% true.
Yeah, I wanted to ask if you actually do believe that you are a non-human person trying to have a human experience. You don't believe that you are after what was revealed in the hypnosis, or?
Well, I still have to get up and brush my teeth, and I still have to do my
Yeah.
taxes and stuff like that. It's all these things I have to so do I believe it? Oh, I can hold it in my mind and contemplate that might be true. But do
Okay.
I truly believe it? Like if
Uh-huh.
I, so here I know enough about myself. If I truly believed that, I would still have doubts. I would sort of second guess myself. So I would try to believe it, but I would doubt myself. So there's two things that would be going on at once. So it's better for me, for my own
Oh,
sanity, to say, wow, this is a good story.
okay. Okay.
There's
Well,
life
it is
lessons
a
in this
good
story.
story.
Life lessons in this story. 48 hours later, after that event, I scream. Yvonne says, "What do they want?" I say, "They want me to play some role."
Yeah.
48 hours later, I started writing the book that would come to define my life, the owl book, that big fat blue owl book. Now I'm seeing owls as an ancient mythology.
Hmm.
You know, owl flies into the night.
Hmm.
It flies into the land of the dead. It flies through the forest in complete darkness, through the night, that would be the metaphor for the subconscious, for the deeper self, for the shadow self. It flies to the land of the dead, and then it comes all throughout our mythologies. The owl comes back with a message. The owl is a messenger. This whole thing started with a voice in my head that said, "This has something to do with the owls." I didn't. It was a message implanted in my mind. It could have been my own thoughts, but it sure felt like a message. So the owl is the ancient mythology. The UFO is the modern mythology. And
Hmm.
I'm seeing them as the same thing.
Hmm.
Right? We don't live in a world where we see totem animals, and maybe in the jungles of Brazil, maybe in a isolated town in South Dakota on the reservation, people still see animals as totems and such like that. But for the most part, Western man is divorced from all that. But we can tap into these things that appear like metal spaceships that are piloted by little scientists. We can wrap our minds around that. So
Right.
I'm saying that the owl mythology and the modern UFO, the ancient owl mythology and the modern UFO mythology are essentially trying to give us the same lesson, and that would be that there's reality is much richer and much more complicated and much more nuanced and much more magical than we are told.
I agree. And I think that it's far more connected as well.
That every thread in the tapestry is wrapped tight around every other thread. You pull on one thread in the tapestry, it pulls on the thread way over there.
I find it interesting that you keep talking about tapestries and threads because something that I write about in my book upcoming in 2024 with Tim and Zontar Press is what I refer to as the quantum quilt.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I see life. And what you're describing fits perfectly into that. So I think that's a wonderful connection right there.
Yeah, and the tapestry is, I didn't invent that metaphor. I mean, people have called it, the threads in the tapestry. All that's, I just grabbed that from something. It's just a perfect analogy for these mysteries.
It is. It absolutely is. And my friend, I think that we are all out of time for tonight on our show. I would like to go ahead and end it right here because I looked at the clock and I've got well over an hour and a half now, it looks like. But you're most welcome to stay on. We can still chat personally. Is that okay
Great.
with you?
Sure, sure. This has been a joy. This has been a total joy.
Excellent. All right, my friends, thank you for stopping by. This has been Tilly Treadwell with Mike Clelland, and we hope that we'll have him on again soon. Do you have any parting words, Mr. Mike?
No, if anyone's interested in me, you can find me. You can Google UFO owls, and I'm the first thing that comes up, and you'll find my website right away. So you don't even have to know how to spell my name. You'll find me. So,
Sounds good. All right, my friends, bye.
bye bye.